Welcome back to class 3. And today we are going to talk about the science of stress. And this is what I mentioned briefly before. Once I knew and started to learn this information, it changed the way I thought and the way that I do things. So I mentioned before about when people say, take a deep breath. You know, people say it, but you really don't pay attention to it until you know the brain science behind it. So I had taken a brain physiology course in my undergrad and got a D, and barely got a D. And because it was all memorization and it was so technical, I don't remember a damn thing from that class. However, I do remember everything that I was taught about the brain regarding mindfulness and stress because it is relevant. It is something that just stuck with me because I wanted to learn more about it. And once you know the basic science of why we get stressed, and that this whole practice of mindfulness is not some woo-woo thing, it is actually based in science, then you can attach this wisdom to it. You can really understand it and practice it in your daily life. So that's what I'm going to teach you today. I am going to teach you what I learned about the 3 different parts of the brain that help you to manage stress, about what they do and why it's so important, and how, again, we integrate the breath into that. So hang on for the ride. I love this lesson, and it really is that thing that when I was doing meditation, when I started, once I learned this, I was hooked. And that's when I thought, wow, if I would have learned this as a kid, how my life would have changed, how it could have been different. And then I started to reach out and find organizations who are teaching it to kids, and started to teach in schools over 12 years ago. Okay, so here we have it. So I'm going to show you the brain model that I use. Okay, so it's just a puzzle. And this is the back of the brain. So this is where your neck is, right? And the brain stem comes down into the spinal cord. And then we have the front of the brain. So I have just one piece here, but it's the prefrontal cortex. It's the part that's right here, okay? I wanted to show you this part first. So here we have the green part. This is the amygdala. It is actually the limbic system, but in here is the amygdala. And the amygdala is the part of the brain that helps us if we are in life or death danger. It is the part of the brain that when we are in life or death danger is going to help us to run faster, fight harder, or freeze and let danger pass us by. So you know this, the fight, flight, or freeze response. That is what happens in this part of the brain. And it is really important, right? We need that. We need that if we are in real life danger. However, most of us, because of where we live and how we have evolved, we are not in life or death danger all the time. However, our bodies don't know that, and they are in this chronic stress mode. And it's not because of danger, it's more because of emotion, because we don't know how to handle emotion. So when the body goes into this fight or flight mode, it's as if a filter goes across this part of the brain so that it can keep us safe. Because when we are in life or death danger, there is no need to communicate with the part of the brain that helps us to be rational. When we are in life or death danger, the body needs to do what it needs to do to keep us safe. And that means that all unnecessary things shut down in the body because it actually is just doing what it needs to do to stay alive. Kind of cool, right? So when that happens, it's like, I can tell you before, when I used to do public speaking, I would go into that life or death mode and I would be in the bathroom sick, like, because I was so nervous. So when we're nervous, we go in here. But that is not life or death danger. Speaking in front of people about things that you love is not life or death danger, but that's what it felt like to me, like actually being sick. So we want to start to notice when we go in here and it isn't life or death danger. Now, to just make sure that you know, if you opened your door, a prime example of if you opened your door today and there was a bear standing at your door, as you opened it, you would see the bear. Your eyes see that, your belly, right? All information goes into the gut, senses this danger, and automatically you would close the door. And that happens in a quarter of a second. That is this part of the brain doing what it needs to do to keep you safe. Then you would come in and start to problem solve. And when we're problem solving, we start to get the prefrontal cortex going. The prefrontal cortex is the part of the brain that human beings have. There are also primates who have this part of the brain, some of it, but not all of it. We are the only species who has all of this. So when we talk about the prefrontal cortex is the part of the brain that helps us to be rational. It is the part of the brain that helps us to problem solve 3-step and up problems. It is the part of the brain that helps us to manage time. It is the part of the brain that helps us to manage emotion. It is the part of the brain that helps us to be organized. So we want to start to use this part of the brain more instead of going into this fight or flight response all the time. The cool thing about this part too, this is the part of the brain that reptiles have. So if you think about the brain of a reptile, this is all they need. Basic functions, right? And as the species evolved, we needed more brain power, right? And so this yellow part of the brain is the cortex. And this is the part of the brain that I call, when I'm teaching the kids, the mammal brain. So if you think about anything that we do that dogs do, it happens in this part of the brain. So all mammals have this part. So it helps us with our 5 senses. It is the part of the brain that also holds the memories between the limbic system, the amygdala, and the mammal brain. Breathing, walking, eating, hearing, smelling, tasting, all of that happens here. Language happens in the prefrontal cortex, right? We are the only species that speaks in words. So just letting yourself understand this part is really important, but we need to know about this part too. So when are the times that you go into this life or death mode, but it is not life or death danger? I can give you some examples. If you have children and they don't do what you ask them to do, when you have to ask them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times, you go into this part of the brain. It's when you start to yell. When you yell, that is the fight response. So if it was real danger, you would actually get into a physical fight. And hopefully you are not getting into physical fights in your home. But I have to tell you that growing up in my house, I did witness physical fights in the home, right? So, and it was never over life or death danger. So we want to start to notice that. So yelling is the fight mode. Flight, when we're talking about emotion, is when we run away from problems, when we avoid. That is when we are using the fight or flight mode. And it's not real danger, but it is emotion. And then the freeze mode, freeze is when we, silent treatment. So just knowing, like, okay, so when do you do that? It might be when you might feel yourself going into fight, flight, or freeze when you get a phone call and it's someone who makes you stressed or someone you don't want to talk to. You'll start to hold your breath. And when you hold your breath, you know, as we talked about in the lesson before, adrenaline and cortisol are flowing through your brain, body, and bloodstream, and they're putting you in that stress mode. We do not want to be in stress mode if it isn't life or death danger. We do not want those chemicals flowing throughout our body and causing chronic stress, because chronic stress wreaks havoc on our organs, on our cells, It is now linked, they say, to 90% of the problems in the body. The illnesses are caused by stress, the underlying cause. You can change that. We can heal. We can heal our bodies. We can heal our minds. We can heal our hearts. So let's start to notice, okay? When we start to get the prefrontal cortex working, the prefrontal cortex is the part of the brain that can tell the amygdala, the limbic system, shh, shh, we don't need you right now. This is not life or death danger. This is emotion. And that is why we have this part of the brain. That is why we need to get this part of the brain connected so that we can start to manage emotions, so that emotion does not manage us. And when we do, the easiest way for us to start to get this part more wired, because what we practice, if you practice anxiety, if you practice frustration, if you practice being a know-it-all, if you practice envy and jealousy, meaning you think about it a lot, it's something that you pay attention to, that's what I mean by practice, then this part of the brain is not going to be as strong as this part. This part is going to be the one. If you worry, if you feel angry, if you feel shame, if you have addictions, if you tend to blame other people, you're in this part of the brain. When we practice meditation, when we practice mindfulness and living in the moment, this is the part of the brain that starts to begin to grow. And when this part of the brain grows, we are going to feel more peaceful, more in control of our everyday lives. So I want to challenge you to get this part of the brain, the prefrontal cortex, more wired so that you can start to feel more connected in your life. You can start to know what it is that you want instead of living everyone else's dreams for you or expectations. You can start to feel more connected to yourself. And when you are more connected to yourself, you are going to feel more connected to the loving people in your life. That felt like a lot. Okay, so let's just take a nice, long, slow, deep breath. Breathing in through your nose and out of your mouth. In through your nose and out of your mouth. So for this one, I want you to breathe in through your nose, count to 3. Out of your mouth, count to 5. In for 3. Out for 5. In for 3. Out for 5. Why do we want to extend the exhale? Because we want to start to have more dopamine and serotonin flowing throughout our brain, body, and bloodstream than adrenaline and cortisol. When dopamine and serotonin are flowing, we are in the prefrontal cortex. When adrenaline and cortisol are flowing, we were in the amygdala. Breathe in for 3. Breathe out for 4, 5, 6. thanking yourself for coming today and taking this time to learn about this. So I want you to notice when you start to go into fight, flight, or freeze, and it is not life or death danger. Use your breath to help you, but also use your breath proactively. Just breathe every day. Take 5 minutes. 5 minutes to breathe and just to give yourself this baseline of knowing that you can create peace from within. See you next time.